those- got it. Okay. Um, uh, Believe it or not, we actually have a really cool film program at Santa Clara. It's kind of this little hidden secret. And the four panelists that you see up here are all graduates of our program. I'm going to go on a limb and say, Mike, you're the oldest, I think. I definitely know Lexie's the youngest in terms of the recent grads. But what they've done since they've graduated here represents a wonderful array of what you can do coming out of our program and what we prepare people for, both on the business side of the entertainment industry and on the creative side of the entertainment industry. And that I just want all of you as students, as we go through this, to know that you can go into this industry, you can have wonderful careers, you can have rewarding lives, and you can be happy as you can humanly possibly imagine. It's all doable. These four people are wonderful, amazing people. They're some of my absolute favorites that I ever had while I was at Santa Clara teaching them. But their journeys aren't unique to the point where you can't replicate what they've done. And I think what they will talk to you about is that they can do that. And if, that idea of, if I can do it, you can do it. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat as you can. To our four panelists, I'm going to represent this the way we do the shadowing program, where I'm just going to ask you to please kind of tell us what you do, kind of how, and then how you got here. And then I may follow up with questions about kind of what prepared you. I think I will start with Mike. Mike's, for the lack of a better introduction to say, he's at Hulu/Disney, and spent a great deal of time at NBC Universal, owned by parent now, Comcast. And Mike's on the business side, but I'll let Mike explain to you what he does. So go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Mike. That's enough Mikes. Like Mike said, I'm at Hulu. My title says content partnerships, but generally we're content acquisition. So if you're watching a film on Hulu, that's us. We split our team between major studio acquisitions and independent acquisitions. So my counterpart Aja works with A24 and Neon and all of the fun indie partners, whereas I work with the major studios. And so each of us have a team of 4 people that we're kind of actively out in the market trying to figure out what films make sense for Hulu and what kind of strategy we want to acquire those on, be it based on windowing or pricing and things like that. It is a long, convoluted path to where I got here, and so I won't give you every single detail, but I started in post-production at Comcast, NBC Universal. I stayed there for 15 years, and I worked through a number of different facets across the company, got into a rotational program, and then pivoted to the business side of the world, working across the international business in that rotational program, and then went to digital distribution. Then we launched PVOD, and it was crazy, and everybody got to watch movies at home. And then from there, left and joined Hulu to lead the content acquisitions team.
Mike, you did something unique at NBC Universal. You went through a management training program, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that and how that helped you transition kind of from the post-production world into more of the business management world that you're in now.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of the major studios have rotational programs in some regard, but I think Comcast, NBC Universal have a lot of rotational programs. It's more of a holdover from the GE days. And so I always tell everybody that the Page program is a great program at NBC Universal to start your career there. And I think Lexie could probably talk a little bit about that as well. But I got into this program that was called the Future Leaders Program. Again, I said it was 2 years. And really what they were looking for is how do we develop internal leadership and make sure that we're finding the right talent and bringing them up within the company. So it was this long, arduous process. There was actually like a math test involved. There was a psych eval. And then they chose me and one other individual, and they're still doing that program, and they've expanded it to be in the foreign markets as well. So there's 2 in the States and 2 in Europe that are kind of starting every single year in that program.
And then one more follow-up with you, Mike, and then I'll move on to Lexie, just because of the business connection, and leave the creative side and as we kind of pivot. What about your education here do you think helped prep you for going into the industry?
So I think the best thing to start with would be storytelling. And believe it or not, I quote Mike often. And I even just quoted him in a coffee chat that one of our attendees and I had recently. And I told him, you know, Mike always said, I would have written you less, but I didn't have the time. It takes longer to be more succinct, which I always have trouble with anyway. But I think that even, you know, jumping from NBC Universal and going to Hulu and leading a team now in an activity that I have never done before, that was all about having a strong narrative and being able to speak what that story was and what my story was and how I can drive value within the organization from there. So even though you may be thinking about, I'm a filmmaker, I'm making a film, or I'm not a filmmaker, I'm a marketing major or something like that, you should really have a sense of what is your narrative, what is the story that you're bringing out, and, you know, be able to show that in a very succinct 3-minute or less elevator pitch.
Thanks, Mike. And that is a nice transition, because one of the things I want everybody to also be hearing is the idea of whether you're on the creative side or whether you're on the business side, the understanding of both sides is very crucial to success in this industry. You can't just go down and say, I'm a creative and I don't care about business, because the rest of the industry does. And the creatives will start nodding when I talk about this. The meetings that I have been in with business people who have no idea how a story is told, or the notes that I've received from executives where my jaw drops and goes, are you serious? That will make the film worse, not better. And then when you find that person that knows both, not expert, but has knowledge, those are the golden people that really, really also excel in the industry. So
Mike, if you'll actually let me add really quick,
yes,
sorry,
please.
very quick story, just to kind of double cross that, is that the first time I met with Jeff Shell, he was asking me about the rotational program I was in and where I was before. And I said, you know, before this program, I was just an editor. And he literally cut me off and said, never, ever say just an editor. You understand the product that we are making and the product that we are delivering to the world more than most of the people that he works with on a day-to-day basis. So don't sell yourself short, and understanding both sides of it is very important.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And that brings us to Lexie.
Hi,
Lexie,
I'm Lexie.
You're at Prime Video.
Yes, I am. Actually, well, yeah, I'm also, my role is under the studio side. So I am technically on the Amazon MGM studios, but all roles under Jeff Bezos at some point.
So what is it that you do? And how did you get there? Because I know, was it at Focus? You were at Focus Features for a while.
Yes.
And then for the audience, Mike referenced the NBC Page program, which is rotational training program done at NBC Universal. Lexie went through that actual program.
Yeah. I'll start most recently. So now I do marketing co-promotions. So I will work with third-party brands to amplify the marketing releases of upcoming films and series on Prime Video. And I did that same thing at Focus. My go-to example is like when you see a Jurassic Park themed hamburger at Burger King, that's the type of stuff that our team is doing. We're leveraging the IP that we own and have the rights to with third-party brands, getting them to activate in the marketplace at the same time as we do. The kind of business side of this is that they then put marketing spend behind these Jurassic Park cheeseburgers, and that marketing spend ultimately drives awareness for our movie that's coming out, and we're able to kind of expand the reach of our marketing campaigns without putting additional marketing spend behind them. We're looking for those third-party brands to do that spend on our behalf in order to get access to the IP that we would typically charge a licensing fee for. We waive those licensing fees in exchange for marketing support during the time of release for our series or films. And how I got there is kind of it's a long story, but I started, as both mics have referenced, in the NBC Universal Page program. So I joined that straight out of college, and it's a 1-year rotational program within NBC Universal. There's 2 programs. There's one based out of New York City, and there's one based out of LA. I was in the LA program. They run very similarly. You are assigned to 4 3-month rotations within the NBC Universal business units. The programs differ in the sense that the rotational opportunities are a bit different depending on whether you're in LA or in New York. New York is a lot more business focused, a lot more news focused, but then they also have late night opportunities. So if you're interested in writing late night comedy, things like that, there's those rotations there for you in New York, but you'll also have to deal with the ad sales rotations and the news desk rotations as well. On the LA side, there's a bit of a broader range of opportunities just because a lot more of the company is based out of LA. So there are opportunities across development, production, marketing, in both film and TV, as well as digital opportunities with Fandango. And I worked with Mike in digital distribution. So there's lots of different things that you can get involved with in both sides of the program. I joined the program because I was really interested in working at Focus Features, which was the indie film studio underneath Universal. And I had a friend who was a page and she had a rotation at Focus, and I was like, great, that's going to be my way in. I don't know anybody else anywhere else. And I was able to get a rotation at Focus, and kind of good luck and good timing. The department that I was a page for had an opening on the team. And so I got acquainted with the team and went back and worked there full time once the program was done. Just a little side note, it's a rotational program, but you can't leave the program for internal jobs. You have to complete the program. So even though it's prepping you for jobs, there are some kind of blockers along the way, but it's ultimately a great experience. It's a really small program. On the LA side, each cohort is generally around 15 to 20 people, and cohorts start 4 times a year. So there's about whatever that math is per year, 15 times 4, 60 to 80 people a year. And then the New York program is about double the size. So that's just some further details there. I'm happy to connect with anyone after this. If you have, real nitpicky questions about the program, I'm sure Mike or whoever can give you my contact information. But from there, I stayed at Focus, and I was similar to Mike again, also on the marketing post-production side. So I worked in creative services, which essentially any trailer, TV spot, any type of marketing content flowed through our team before it went out to, be shown on the big screen at AMC or shown on Hulu as a ad buy, things like that. So it was a really technical job, which really served me well, as Mike said before, like understanding both sides. My job now is more on the business side, but understanding how every marketing asset is created has served me really well. Even though it's not what I do on a day-to-day basis anymore. Now, when I'm making marketing requests, I kind of know, oh, this is something that's going to take the team a week to do, or, oh, this is something that takes 30 seconds, and kind of being able to have that background knowledge of what it takes to complete the jobs that you're asking other people to do is really helpful for me. And from creative services, I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't where I wanted to be long-term. Again, it was really technical and just wasn't where I saw myself growing. And one of the benefits of being at a smaller company like Focus, the size of the company was like 120 people. There's a lot more room to kind of test out different things. And so I was able to learn about partnerships and realize that that was really what I wanted to be doing. And there was a lot of freedom and flexibility. So I actually ended up transitioning into a full partnerships role where I kind of oversaw partnerships and strategy for Focus, mainly focusing on Downton Abbey movies. And then from there, I kind of realized that it was really Downton Abbey and nothing really else that had huge partnership potential at Focus. And it was something that I really wanted to be doing. So I ended up making the jump over to Prime Video, which had a much bigger, a whole team of partnerships and much more titles and opportunities that lended themselves to those types of larger scale partnerships that I was interested in doing. And I've been there for like the last year and a half.
Lex, and you were, remind me, you were a business major and a comm minor, is that, or were you double?
I was a marketing major out of the business school and then a comm minor.
And the comm classes that you took were history theory classes, I remember. Did you take any production?
I took one. I took like the required production class, but I didn't take any of the more advanced film classes or like the screenwriting classes. I really took more of the theory and like business of entertainment classes.
The business and history classes. Great.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. I am going to move on to Miss Veronica Rodriguez. And so for everybody watching, Veronica, Mike, and Mallory were comm majors. You may have had minors or double majors that I know of, but I only know it's comm. And then I just had Lexie, I think, in like 4 or 5 classes. So that's why I always consider Lexie a comm major. But Veronica is a writer-director and who most recently, congratulations, released her first feature film on Disney Plus over the summer, which was wonderful and lovely. And Veronica, can you tell us what you do as a writer-director and kind of like how you got here?
For sure. Howdy. I'll make a few corrections. Sorry to be this person. Writer, director, producer, and Slumber Party was my second film. But the first, it's okay. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. I mean, I wish a $20 million movie was my first film, but that don't happen. But yeah, so that's me. What was the question?
What do you do as a writer, producer, kind of on a regular basis?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I guess like this morning before this, I had my first pitch for hopefully my next movie. So it's a lot of pitching. It's very entrepreneurial, very entrepreneurial. So much work to be done, creative work to be done to just get the job. And then, you hope you get the job, but you get, yeah. So like, for example, for this movie, it would be I was pitching to rewrite a current draft of the script that they got in before the strike. It's based on a book, and then direct that movie because they wanted a filmmaker to kind of do both. So that was pitching to, a studio and the producers attached to it at the same time. And so that's my day-to-day is pitching on open directing assignments or open writing assignments. And then other than that, either writing my own stuff or just taking meetings with lots of cool people at cool companies so that they know who I am. When they get projects coming in, hopefully, if it's in my vibe, then they'll be like, oh snap, I met with that girl Veronica who would be great for this. Let me contact her reps, see if there's collaboration there. That's the kind of stuff I do working within the system. Like right now I'm getting an independent film off the ground. That's more where my producing stuff comes into play. And that's just, it's a lot of, I wrote the script, I'll direct it. I'm also going to act in it, which would be crazy, but it'll be fun. And, but that's right now working with my capital P producer, who he's taking on a lot of that heavy brunt work once we do get it off the ground, because I'll be handling a lot of all the creative stuff and working with my reps and again, taking meetings, going out and pitching this to find financiers. But now that Bottoms, I don't know if y'all have seen Bottoms, it's so good, you should go see it. But now that Bottoms has been out and studio made it for $13 million. You know, hopefully more female driven comedies will be made by studios in that budget range. So now pre-strike, we were going to make it, you know, for $3 million, and we were supposed to shoot it during the strike. It might be a blessing in disguise that happened, because now the strike kind of fizzled what that independent film was going to be. And now we might be able to make it for more money with bigger partners. So it's kind of navigating where that film will go.
Ronnie, can I ask a question in between there to say, how do you decide what to write about and what you want to make a film about?
The universe speaks to me. I'm just kidding. Yes, that is true a little bit, but I kind of think I guess it is strategic. I definitely have to feel inspired by the idea, but for example, I've made my, you know, coming of age Disney co-viewing movie in my style with some edge. That's definitely not what I'm writing now, because I need to, for me, it's very important that I don't get pigeonholed into what that is. I'll definitely go back and make more, you know, female driven coming of age stuff because it's fun and I love doing it. But my next thing, like the first show that I ever wrote for was a Disney show. And I feel so blessed that the next show I immediately went to was an HBO show, because I was able to get out of which, and I'll go back. I love good YA stuff is amazing, but like, it's very important for other people to have proof, you know, that like I can do more than just this one thing. And so right now, I'm doing more still in my tone, still it's my comedy, but even I'm very much focused on original work. A lot of reboot stuff gets sent my way. I'm just not my thing. I would much rather, unless there's like the Freaky Friday reboot with, you know, that I told my reps, like I would do that because Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis are gonna be in it. They're not trying to just whatever. But other than that, I will not. I would much rather, I'm trying to calibrate my career to have it be what I want people to see me as. And I want it to be a Veronica Rodriguez film. And to do that, that's why it's very important I make this independent film. It's very important that I put the work I put out there is what I want people to hire me for. Whereas up to my career up to now has been people having dope projects and being like, hey, we like you, want to put your spice on our thing? And I'm like, yes, great, let's do it. Now I'm like, that's a cool thing, but I have a thing, and do you want it?
And how did you get there? Because your path involves a graduate school program.
Yes. I mean, I basically talk about Santa Clara in every general I have, because I didn't even realize that this was a thing I could make money off of and do until senior year at Santa Clara. And like, at first I'm like, I'm going to write a feature film and an independent thesis. And then two girls who were in the production class thesis were like, will you write a script for us? And then they couldn't find a director. And then they were like, do we just want to direct it? We can't find a director. I'm like, okay. And I fell in love. It was the greatest experience ever. And then I knew I wanted to continue doing this, but I had no reel. I literally just directed something, so that wasn't even edited. So I applied to producing programs. And then I ended up choosing the Peter Stark producing program at USC. And it was fantastic. I always say, like, Stark didn't teach me to make a movie. It taught me how to make my second, third, and fourth. It taught me how to navigate the industry, which is sometimes way more important in terms of establishing a career than that's a weird word to say. Than the now I can't get it out of my head. Then the creative aspect of it. And so I went into that program being like, I'm a writer director, but also which I am, but realizing that I love producing, and that's half or more of the battle. So I went to that program. After that, I worked at Funny or Die for a long time and was just making my own stuff. And then after that, I started writing for TV. A lot happened in between, but those are the broad strokes.
Yeah, and a child somewhere popped,
Yeah,
in
had a
there too.
pandemic
Yeah.
baby. I said this earlier today that like, and I'll tell this to my daughter because she should know. I love her so much, but like I totally had her because I was so bored during the pandemic and I'm such a workaholic. And I was like, I need to produce something. I need to make something. And so I made a child.
Yeah. I will say there's some great images of Veronica. I don't know how pregnant you were on on the last film, but on the set, it's really neat to see you navigating that while something like 7 or 8 months pregnant.
Yeah, my first episodes of TV that I directed, I went into my 3rd trimester while pregnant during COVID. And my husband convinced me that like these special masks from like Sweden that look like sports cups that you wear on your crotch. Like, so he like got me this mask. So I'm wearing like a cup on my face, like 8 months pregnant. And like this was intense COVID in Canada. And so you couldn't even like be 6 feet next to like your production designer. So it was just madness and I looked ridiculous. But at a certain point, I like couldn't walk anymore. And so they just had me in a chair and like gave me the microphone. And it was actually, that might be the peak moment in my whole life where you just talked with the voice of God and everyone just listens to you. You don't even have to move.
Okay.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
I'll transition to Mallory only because I don't know how to transition out of that story.
I go on tangents. I love you, Mal. Goodbye.
But Malarie Howard is a writer and an AP on a Marvel TV show. So Mal, can you talk to us about what you do on a regular basis in the industry and then how your path, because Mallory went through working at an agency before she found her kind of her writing gigs.
Yeah, I'm also going to be that person and I'm going to say writer, co-producer because it's important. Yeah, I actually worked in, and I'm sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable, so I'm sorry in advance if I glitch out, but I worked in the tech startup world actually right after I graduated because I just felt really insecure about moving straight to LA and becoming a starving artist, especially with all the creatives on this call. It's really intimidating when you have business friends and engineer friends who have jobs before they graduate, and then you're just going to go live off credit cards in Los Angeles or New York, and everyone else has stock options and healthcare, and you don't. Still stick with it because it's worth it. Which I quickly found out after doing a year in the startup world. I hated every moment of it, and it just wasn't my calling. And so I wound up, after having like a come to Jesus moment, rock bottom moment, I went to LA with one credit card that I almost maxed out right before I got hired at Gersh, which is one of the top agencies here in the US. And I worked on a TV lit agent's desk. So I was reading a bunch of TV scripts from writers who wanted to get staffed on shows or create their own shows. And I've said in the workshop that I've been running, that is where I realized there's a huge difference between somebody who writes as a service and somebody who is a creator. And I think that became really evident too in the strike. I saw a lot of my friends who I think have these big, beautiful ideas that are worlds, think of pigeonhole themselves into being like a service worker almost, like they just pump out content and that's all that they do. And I really think that we need to remind ourselves that we are artists and the artistic process takes as long as it takes. And I realized I had been very deeply kind of conditioned by the studio system to see myself as just a writer. And in that time, like very similar to Ronnie in quarantine, during the strike, I was like, I need to make something. And I wrote this short that I co-wrote with my friend Duyn, who's in Scotland and is a literal clown, like he went to clown school. And we wrote a short together, and I'm going to Scotland in a couple weeks to location scout, and I'll be directing for the first time. And now I'm seeing myself as like a full filmmaker, which I feel like I can see myself now because like Ronnie was talking about, have navigated the business of Hollywood and the studio system, and have seen not just like the creative side and the service side, but also the entrepreneurial aspect of what it takes to make a show or make a movie.
And Mal, your path to LA in terms of like Gersh to non-agency work.
Yeah.
How did you make that jump from being basically kind of an agent in training to being something who agents represent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want to work at an agency. Everyone just told me that I should. So I actively tried to mess up my interview with my agent, and everyone told me, don't say that you're a writer, say you want to be an agent. So I told my agent, I want to be a writer. And he was like, great, I hate reading. So he just made me read all the scripts, but that was the best experience for me, because I got to see how the business of Hollywood worked. Because I was talking to writers, or listening to my boss's phone calls with his writers, I was also listening to their negotiations with their lawyers, to the studios, to the producers. So I really saw a full landscape of Hollywood, and it allowed me to meet other assistants in other aspects of the industry. And networking is super important. I know Ronnie is going to be running something soon in the future, hopefully, about networking. But I met other assistants who were doing other things. And one of the assistants that I was just most curious about worked at a company called Super Deluxe, which has gone bankrupt since, but they were like this weird, quirky internet production studio that was getting their feet wet in film and television. And as I was leaving the agency life, they had an opening for a assistant to a development executive. So this was my transition into the studio system. And I was seeing how TV shows went from just a pilot to a whole season worth of content, or multiple seasons of content. And that is also where I believe I understood the concept of world building, because a lot of creatives, I think, have this idea, but they don't know how to build a whole universe around it. And that was such a great experience for me in that aspect, and also with the business side. I highly encourage any creatives who want to get into the industry to definitely do the business part of it, either at an agency, at a studio, at a production company. It's just so valuable, not just for your understanding of the landscape, but to protect yourself and your art. Because a lot of my creative friends who didn't go those paths wound up getting screwed over by kind of the shifty aspects of the industry, because of their lack of understanding of how deals work and how agents work, and how just all the ways that somebody can take your work for free. So I highly recommend understanding that business aspect so you can protect yourself and your IP.
I will plug in that we teach a class now in the comm department called The Business of Hollywood. That class is designed to teach you about the structure of the industry. Not so much, we're not reading contracts and things like that, but the idea of understanding the interplay between the creator and the network, and even the independent financiers, and then add in audience to that play, and how that going back and forth, and and then add in technology, and how that's been shaping and changing the industry. And it's a class that is a delight to teach, and is constantly having to be updated, because that all changes. I mean, I only teach a class once a year, and it seems like a year later, it's like, oh God, I got to change all the readings. Something happened. So this last year we were teaching it just as the strike was happening. And so we were talking a lot about what we think is going to happen and things like that. So recommend. I'm going to open this question up to the whole gang. And then looking at the time, we're kind of coming up on 12:10, which is about the time that we want to be able to open it up to questions from everybody else. But I wanted to ask the whole gang, what about like a balanced life? Like, how are you able to have a life that you enjoy? I know Mike and Ronnie have children. How are you able to balance your work life in this industry? There's always horror stories that you can't do it. And so I just kind of would throw that out there as the group, and any one of you can just jump in and kind of say what you're doing.
I'll go.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Something I think about daily. I was as a mom and a woman, it's really fucking hard. Like, it is an uphill battle every day. The guilt is real. I've made career decisions because me as an individual, I'm itching to go direct, but then I'm also like, my poor kid barely saw me for 5 months. I need to go write in a room and be more around. So I'm constantly trying to figure that out. But for me, honestly, Mike, again, something you said to me, I think back on a shadowing trip to LA or something, you when living in LA, you said something like, live where you want to spend your weekends, because you're going to be, going all over the place and doing all this stuff. I basically took that advice and applied it to my life. Like, when I had my daughter, I was like, this industry is going to swallow me whole, and I don't know how to do. I mean, I'm very untraditional in many ways, but like, there are things about my life that are very traditional. And I'm like, I've chosen to have a family. I want to have that family and be present. I won't be able to do it if I'm constantly feeling the pull of all the stuff in LA. So we moved and made our home base in NorCal, in wine country. But even that was strategic. We live 15 minutes from Santa Rosa Airport that flies to LAX and Burbank every single day. So I basically have one foot here, and at the drop of a hat, I can go to LA for the 24 hours or a couple days, get all my stuff in, have my individual person mom fun, and then come back home to, my life with my daughter by the river. So that's the first year of it was hell, but now we're kind of in a groove. But also, as my kid grows and hopefully I get another film and it takes me somewhere else, I have to now think about, she's always come with me. Now she's in preschool. Like, does she go? Like, that's something I can't even think about because it's going to be such a hard decision. So constantly adapting, but it's doable. Not easy, but it's doable. Okay,
I'm going to co-sign what Ronnie said. I live in Seattle. I needed to get out of LA, which was a lot harder because I was a TV writer, and a lot of the writers' rooms were based in LA. There are a few in New York. And as much as I like to romanticize the idea of living in New York, I am not an East Coast girly. I will never be an East Coast girly. So I felt really trapped, and during quarantine, everything went on Zoom. So I felt the freedom to finally leave. And once I went to Seattle, I was like, I'm never going back to LA, because LA, it just, the industry is so present there, and it was really difficult for me to remove my personal life and my internal life from my professional life. And if a lot of my friends love LA, they never want to leave LA, and that's great, because as Mike said, it's just like where you want to spend your weekends, and I want to like frolic in the woods by a river. Cottagecore.
Good one.
Yeah. We have great vineyards too in Washington. But I think being where you feel good and is a huge aspect of it. And I think also stepping away from LA and the studio system did attribute to me starting to feel more like a filmmaker again, and wanting to go the independent route and figuring out how to make my own content outside of Hollywood. But I still work in Hollywood. I didn't mention, but I write for Marvel. And that's one of the biggest like Hollywood things you could do. So I'm still very much in the studio system, but like Ronnie said, I feel like I can choose to be in that. I have one foot there, but then I have one foot where I actually want to be.
And also I think I speak for both of us. We were only able to do that after we did the years of grinding in LA. It was so necessary. You have to be able to have that network and the connections and stuff to be able to do that. So both are definitely necessary.
Yeah.
Mike or Lexie?
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to feel like I'm giving the unpopular opinion. But like, when you're young and you don't have all of the other responsibilities, now is the time to just fucking kill it. Like, you need to be where you need to be, and you need to be, top of your game all the time. And then as you get older and all the other responsibilities come up, then I think what I'm kind of hearing and what I try to practice is be very good at setting boundaries, right? Like I am unfortunately in the office in a very real way 4 days a week in Santa Monica. I also moved out of LA, but not as far as the other two did. I moved to kind of like Calabasas area. So it's like an hour to get into Santa Monica, right? But when I'm there and until I leave, I'm just trying to use all of that time as much as I can. And then when I look at the clock and this is the time that I said I'm going to leave, then I leave and I go home and I make sure that I leave all that shit behind me in Santa Monica. And when I come home to my 9-year-old and 8-year or 7-year-old daughter, they're there and they know that I'm not bringing any of that to them and that I'm present and not thinking about work. So I think it's set boundaries, but also you're young and you don't have anything else to worry about. So do everything you can in order to get ahead. I had a friend that was in recruiting and he said, remember that Jay Leno slept in a car to get where he was. We're not saying sleep in a car, but find the thing that you would be willing to sleep in a car for. Again, do not sleep in a car, but find that thing that you are so passionate about that it doesn't matter that, when I first started editing, I was working 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then 3 to midnight and then overnights and double shifts and things like that. Like it's just a part of how it has to start.
Lex, anything?
Yeah. I would echo all of that in the two kind of like things that jump out to me. First is what Mike said and what everyone else has touched on, but like those early years, like that's when you have boundless energy. It's when you don't have responsibilities. Like my first boss was an absolute psychopath and I worked from like 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And if I got home by 9, I was like amazing. But I lived with my roommates. I had a long distance boyfriend. Like it was fine. It was great. I got to absorb everything that I needed to absorb. I basically worked 3 years in 1 year. So I like learned a lot and I made a ton of overtime. So like it was all great. I would not do that now. I would take a different job. I would find a different boss, but which leads me to my other thing, which is that when it comes to boundaries, like you'll find that there are managers and there are teams that you can be on that respect boundaries. And then there are people that don't. And while it's on you to like set those boundaries and say like, I don't check email from 6:30 to 9, there's certain things that you can kind of set as an expectation for your team, but then also take note of who's respecting those boundaries and who isn't, and put yourself in situations where you're on a team where that happens. In my experience, it's working with women and working with women, working mothers and things like that who understand, no offense to the mics, but they kind of have that understanding of like, all the things that women are responsible for doing when it comes to like having a home and a family and all of that sort of stuff. So right now, I'm the only person on my team. It's a all women team and I'm the only person who doesn't have children. So everyone has boundaries. Everyone's boundaries are respected. There's open communication about like who needs what and when. My last 2 bosses were single with no children. So their idea of boundaries was a lot different. So just take note of those opportunities and kind of, it's obviously not something you can really tell like in an interview, but it's stuff that you'll, pick up on as you're working, and you can strive to put yourself in those situations because no one's going to tell you to like stop working or anything like that. And if you're motivated and want to do well, there's always stuff that you can be doing, but it's kind of on you and on your team to make those actionable.
I would just add really quick, we're kind of all talking about putting up with some, long hours and some extra work in the beginning, but it's important to note there's a very real difference between doing things that are important for the job and that are important for getting ahead in your career and learning, and putting up with being treated poorly and being treated with disrespect. And I have plenty of stories, and I'm sure everybody else on the call does as well, where there were situations that we were put in that we shouldn't have been in, or that people treated us with disrespect. And those are very real boundaries that you need to set from the get-go. And it has nothing to do with getting ahead in the world. Set those boundaries and do not cross them.
And you're not going to get blacklisted. I think that's the biggest fear when you're like 22 or 23 and telling your boss, like, I actually don't want to pick up your laundry. I had to go pick up a suit from like a mall across LA in like rush hour traffic for this person. And it was, I didn't even have enough money for gas because I didn't get paid enough. And it was just like so stressful and gave me so much anxiety, but I felt like I had to do it because if I said no, then I would get blacklisted in Hollywood and I would never find another assistant job. And that's just not true because of what Lexie was saying. There are plenty of people who respect and understand boundaries, and there's always going to be somebody that will be in your corner. So don't be afraid. Even if you get fired, like there's another job waiting for you.
Thank you. And I would add that I walked off shows at a drop of a hat because of disrespect. And if you ever want a really great story, just come to my office and ask me about the producer that was on coke pretty much 24/7 and what I had to deal with and why I left that show. But we have questions in the chat, and I'll start with Peyton. In a rapidly changing industry, what strategies do you employ to stay current and adapt to new technologies or trends?
If you're interested in the business, you need to be a student of the business all the time and never stop learning about what's going on in the business and what's going on with digital media. And we're in a really cool place right now because a lot of media companies are very interested in what is going on with all of the film and all of the strikes and everything like that. And so there are podcasts and we can make a list, and there are newsletters and we can make a list, but it's really just puck. And there are emails that you can get, and there are websites that you should be checking on a daily basis. And those are the ways that you're going to stay up to date.
Yeah, I would just double tap on that. They're like Deadline, The Wrap, Hollywood Reporter. They're called industry trades. Like, just subscribe to all of those e-newsletters. And, you know, I remember when I was like a senior and like early, I would literally like set a calendar block on my calendar to just like go through, read the trades, and like Google anything that I didn't understand, to be able to just keep that stuff top of mind. Because it's definitely not, as you get older, the need to like stay up to date doesn't go away. You know, you can't just be like, oh, I don't understand, that's for kids. Like, well, kids are watching content. You have to know how to reach those kids.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And in terms of it's good to know what's going on, and it helps you find, at least from the creative standpoint, like what opportunities are out there and stuff like that. On the other hand, like for where I'm at is, you know, I don't care like about something like, you know, like podcasts were huge for a while, and I was like, dang, I could use some money. Should I do that? And it's like, that's just not my thing. Or, you know, and even when I'm pitching what a movie like mine should look like I actually don't like how a lot of TV looks nowadays. Like, I like an older look, filmic, it's warmer, everything's cool and blue now. Like, but like, that's me. And I think for a while, there's a reason why a lot of things are kind of the same right now, and think the way it is. But if maybe more, at least on the creative side, people were like sticking to their guns of like, no, this is how I see it, this is what I want to do, and it's different, but whatever. And I don't care if like AI is taking over, I'm gonna do it this way. Or like, there are certain projects now that I'm just staying like, I think we all know what CG looks like, and we can tell it's CG immediately. I want to do this completely practical. That's just part of how this is now. Like, if Babe can do it and look so good so long ago, should look even better now. But so that's my mindset on that. But you should still know what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and I would add, Mallory, if I can just jump in, I would add what Ronnie is also saying is that she knows what television looks like. So she's actually watching films and television shows to be able to know what's out there. You can't pitch without knowing what is circulating around. And too many students, in my opinion, actually don't consume the product that they actually want to go into working, or whether it's creative or business side. Sorry, Mal, I jumped in.
No, I wanted to back up Ronnie. I don't read anything that comes out of Deadline or Variety, honestly. I don't care. And it's all part of it is also to protect myself as an artist, because I think oftentimes we can get very stuck on comparing ourselves to other people and their art and their journey. And you need to remember that you are your own artist, and like what you're doing is your own thing. But like Mike said, I watch a lot of stuff. I watch a lot of TV, at least even if it's just the pilot of a new series that I'm interested in, just to study it, not necessarily look to it as an example of what I need to be doing, but just studying it for the craft. And then also I highly encourage people to look at international TV and film and those formats. A lot, especially when we're talking about IP, a lot of studios and production companies are trying to redevelop international formats for an American audience, and just having an understanding of what they're doing in France or what they're doing in South Korea is extremely informative to not only your art, but also the business side.
And that leads into the next question that actually says, how has the evolution of digital media and streaming platforms affected your respective careers and the content you work on? I think that that goes directly to what Malarie has been talking about. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Don't
I
quote
can
me.
say that
Don't quote me on the.
Oh.
Sorry. We
Go ahead.
actually have real conversations about movies being sticky in the first 5 or 10 minutes. And I hate everything about the conversation, because on a streaming platform, it's very easy to just push the back button or push an input button and get to a different app. I don't know about anybody else. I've never left a movie theater, and I've seen a lot of really terrible movies. I've left movies on streaming. And so we have these conversations of what's happening in the movie that is causing them to leave. And we get reports of viewership on the films so that we can give notes back to the creators and say, you know, we had a movie called The Drop. It was bad. I don't recommend it. But there were these big fall offs throughout the film. There were 3. And they were happening when there were jokes that were homophobic in nature. And specifically just those 3 times saw huge increases in drop off of viewership. And we actually went back to the filmmakers and said, you guys thought this was funny, or that it just wouldn't play and it wouldn't matter. And it actually caused people to walk away from watching this movie. So there are good things and bad things that come along with that. But like I said, it's a really terrible conversation when you're sitting there thinking nothing really excited happening in the first 10 minutes, and people will turn this off, even if it turned out to be a great movie.
Lexie, you were going to say something?
I got distracted by Mike. I Googled The Drop. Because I hadn't heard about it. Anyway, I was gonna say that like with technology, and especially in our business, like the fight for content is bigger because there's so many more opportunities. And like in my experience, like and you can see it with like Taylor Swift and the Eras tour, but like the power of the studio is kind of crumbling because there's so many other ways that you can get your stuff out there. And working in the studio, it's challenging for us because we're pitching against a bunch of other studios, but then just like other avenues that weren't previously thought of as avenues. And then it's also really interesting working at a streamer where the like talent deals are structured differently when you're making a movie for a streamer versus making a movie for a studio. The ways that you make money are different. And my work touches talent a lot in that we kind of blur that line between a talent endorsement and just a like advertising campaign. And when I was at Focus, we could talk to talent and be like, hey, you want to do this deal that you might have otherwise gotten paid for, but it's going to raise the profile of the movie. More tickets are going to get bought, higher box office. In the end, it's better for you. Whereas we, like now I'm at Prime Video, we're having the same thing with talent like Eddie Murphy. We're trying to get him to do a deal for this Christmas movie that he's in. And he's like, I'm Eddie Murphy, I get paid for this. And we're like, well, it raises the profile of the movie's going to be better. But to Eddie Murphy, it's like he's not getting back end bonuses on a Prime Video movie. So our whole argument has shifted as well in terms of making a movie for a streamer versus making a movie for a traditional theatrical release.
And I think that's one of the things to take away is the understanding how I made a comment this very earlier in this industry. When you think of how the industry, Hollywood entertainment industry has changed in the last 20 years compared to the first 100 years of the industry, technology has just reshaped this in so many different ways. And for those of you who don't realize, most, if not all, streaming services are not profitable. And so Hollywood is still trying to figure out how they're going to monetize this in a profitable way. And until that happens, you'll see changes as people try to figure out all of this and what's going on. And like there was a great article a couple weeks ago in the New York Times, or maybe this is about a month ago, talking about maybe what network television needs to do is to recognize that a lot of old people, that's the only thing they watch. And then they launched The Golden Bachelor, which is now this massive hit because old people are watching it. They're seeing themselves on the screen.
And me.
And
Um,
me.
and actually, and my wife.
Anyone
Both-
watching the Frasier reboot? That is actually really good.
Yeah, well, my wife is watching The Golden Bachelor, and it's just another one of those shows that I have to listen to every single night. Mallory knows what I'm talking about. I go to bed listening to The Housewives and The Bachelor every single night. That's my white noise as my wife watches those shows. My life is hell sometimes. I think we can probably end on this. Only, Maya, I'm gonna expand your question a little bit because you talk about the idea of, you say for Mike and Lexie, although you're focused in the business sector of the entertainment industry, do you feel there's space for you to pitch your creative ideas that are unrelated to your focus and your job? And then the question just moved to other departments within your company. But I think all of the panelists could kind of get into an idea of working for a company. What's the ability to be able to kind of step out of maybe the division that you're in and cross over and deal with whether it's the business going to creative or the creative going to the business? Mike or Lexie on the business side first.
I will own that I don't have a ton of like personal creative endeavors that I'm working on. It's just not, I knew that like fairly early on in my like looking inward and what I wanted to do. That being said, like I still find my job creative. So I think creative means different things to different people. And I think developing your taste and figuring out like what is creative to you, because at least for me, I knew I didn't want a job where I was, you know, doing spreadsheets or like punching them. Like I wanted something that was different on a day-to-day basis. In terms of flexibility to do other things, in my experience, the smaller the company, the more flexibility there is. Going from Focus to Amazon was like a very big culture shock for me, in that at a smaller studio like Focus, there was like, I physically sat next to the digital team, and if they were working on something that I thought was interesting, they would just, you know, pull me into the meeting, or they would shoot me the, you know, Zoom link, things like that. There was a ton of openness to just learn from other teams and be involved in other teams' projects. Whereas now at Amazon, it's much more siloed. It's a lot harder. Like my workload is also bigger, so I don't have as much time as I did when I was younger to just like join other calls and things like that. But I would say like the bigger the studio, and in my experience, the harder it is to have that flexibility of joining other things. But that might just be the studio that I am currently at. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think the question that I used to get the most when I switched from being an editor to being on the business side was, how could you give up being part of the creative world and going over to business? And like Lexie said, I think of the work that I do as very creative. I watch a lot of movies and I read a lot of scripts. And if you try to read a script without an imagination or creativity, then you're probably not really reading the script anyway. But I had a lot of success in working within NBC Universal and branching out and finding new projects to work on. And what I found was that people, especially in Hollywood, love to talk about themselves. And so don't be bashful in chatting with them and figuring out what they're doing and what they're working on. And then you can start learning more from that. And I actually got involved in a thing called The Lab, where it was like a think tank for Donna at the end of the day, where we ended up working on what is Universal going to do with the metaverse, and what is Universal doing with Fortnite and Jimmy Fallon and things like that. And it was all just because, you know, having coffee with the right people and being inquisitive about what's going on and trying to learn the inner workings of how it all works. So do that.
Ronnie,
go at everything with curiosity. Sorry, just to put a pin in it. Go at everything with curiosity.
Ronnie or Mal, I guess we'll end on this because I know we're at 12:30. Have you felt an ability to cross into the business side of things and start making decisions on that? Maybe you don't even want to, so it doesn't matter. But do you feel that you can move into that realm in any way, shape, or possible? Do you find that it gives you more control over your vision as a creator?
Yeah, being a producer, I think, is that like crossover. When I think about that, even when I worked with some of the studio executives that were also producers, sometimes they would have an idea of like, we should make a show about a family show about this person, blah, blah, blah. And then they'd look for writers, directors, creators to make that idea come to life. So I feel like that was an extremely creative process for them, even though they themselves weren't creators. They could work and collaborate with creative and artistic people to make those ideas come to fruition on the screen. And then also just for me, speaking personally, like being a producer now, I have a lot more creative control over my ideas. And a lot of those ideas have to still like be funneled through like a more business mindset, because I'm thinking about budget and I'm thinking about like just more of the logistical aspects of creating something for television and film.
And Ronnie, we can end with you.
For sure. I think that's what at least the Peter Stark producing program was all about. Like capital P producer is you have one foot in business and one foot in the creative. And that's what it romanticized it in this beautiful way. But like the best producers do both. And I think any type, whether it's, you know, I tried to help answer another question in the chat about animation, but like whether it's whatever creative field you have, if whether you're choosing to work on the studio side or on the creative side, it's an entertainment industry or it's an arts industry. And so you have the experience to juggle both sides, whatever side you choose, you deal with the other side. And so it's definitely good for you to understand it all. I talked in a circle and forgot what I was saying, but yeah.
What you said was great.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of our panelists for spending an hour with us very much. Thank you so much for taking your time. We appreciate you coming back and providing your experience for all of us. I'll do another plug for the idea that Santa Clara is not known as a film school or something like that. We actually don't want to be a film school. That's not our intent. Our intent is to be a film program that is taught in a much more critical studies way, that's in a Jesuit way. And I actually think that's a good thing. And I will tell you that you can have a very successful career if it's something that you want. And these four wonderful human beings are the epitome of all of that. And they are also as wonderful as they seem in person. And so thank you very much. Emmanuel, I will throw it back to you.
Sweet. Well, I think we're now here at the tail end of our event. Thank you, panelists, for being here with us, sharing your wonderful insight. I know a lot of students found that to be really valuable. We'd hope to have you guys back again in the near future. So we'll definitely keep our conversation up going. But yeah, Mike, happy to end it here. And there is a recording, so I'm happy to share it with you, Mike, if you'd like to go ahead and send it out to students, to those students that probably missed this event. Awesome.
Great.
Right.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.